Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody, to the last session of the Connect University Summer School. You were the heroes of these last 2 weeks. It was quite a marathon of green and digital topics. So first of all, congratulations and thank you for the participation. I just want to tell you that if any of you have actually followed 7 sessions, you are entitled to receive the Connect University Summer School diploma. And special thanks to Andrea Dumitrascu that was behind all of this undertaking, and she will most probably follow again with some of you offline to get the diploma and how to do it. So before we launch the last session, few words about the Connect University. This is the 6th season that we have Connect University. Connect University was born in 2015. It has already had 350 sessions. And we had invited speakers, very prominent speakers on different topics around digital. So if you really want to know what is the latest development in digital, Connect University is the place to be. We had over these 350 sessions invited, and we had interacted with 150,000 people. And the Connect University summer schools have grown over the last years. So for example, this year we had 8,000 registrations from 89 countries, and another 4,000 people were watching us through YouTube channel. So as you see, it has attracted a lot of people, but we hope that it was really educational and beneficial in your professional or your personal life. Now, this session today will be actually with the motto, it's not enough to understand, it's not enough to know, we have to act. And that's where really what will make a difference. The understanding is necessary, but the action is what makes the difference. So for that, we have 3 speakers, 2 that were announced and 1 that couldn't make it this morning. So I'll introduce the lady later on. But we will start with the prominent speaker in the space and colleague. And it's my immense pleasure to welcome Luis Neves. Luis Neves is the CEO of GESI, Global Enabling Sustainability Initiative. He is CEO of GESI since 2017, but before that, for about 9 years, he was the chairman of GESI. He has worked before in Deutsche Telekom, if I understand, a sustainability officer, if I remember well. And he was also he's also prominent player in international fora, such as the United Nations Global Compact Lead Group, ECONSENS, and the UNFCCC, that everybody knows, of course, because of the climate change. So it's my pleasure, Luis, to invite you to be the first speaker of today's closing session.
Well, thank you so much, Elias, for the invitation, first of all. And also thank you to DG Connect for inviting me to speak today for the closing session. I am happy to see how the summer school sessions strongly show how interconnected climate change is with digital transformation. So at GESI, we have been working on the intersection between sustainability and digital for almost 20 years. We believe that climate action can be accelerated by harnessing the power of digital in a responsible and inclusive manner. We also have strong evidence through extensive research, our recognized Smart Series reports, as well as our latest report, Digital with Purpose. So we have, through that research, we understand that digital technologies will be fundamental to address climate change. But the evidence alone is neither enough nor responding to the biggest challenge humankind is facing, climate change. The world continues to suffer from rising temperatures, deforestation, and other destructive practices that we need to solve very, very fast. We need collective action to stop this. We all bear responsibilities, policymakers, business, and civil society. So the point I would like to make today is that we have been talking about this for many years. So if we look back to the Paris Agreement in 2015, where, you know, a great number of countries committed to targets by 2050. What we see is that 6 years are gone. So we are already in 2021. And we need to ask ourselves where we are. What have we done in the last 6 years? Have we been going in the right direction, or are we still in the same place that we were 6 years ago? And if we reflect on this, I think almost all of us come to the conclusion that we are still going in the wrong direction. We are still seeing emissions rising. We are still seeing great impacts of climate on Earth. And therefore, we need action. We need to move. We need to move, and we need to move very fast. And we also need leadership. I think that's one of the key things that has been missing. And leadership means that both policy, business, and citizens, they all need to act. So when it comes to policy, we need policymakers really to give us the vision, and the vision can no longer be 2050 targets. I think a vision around 2050 is leading us to disaster. We need to bring back that date to 2030, 2040. We can no longer think about 2050. So we really need policies and policymakers really to look into a different direction, really to put in place the right framework that allows us really to answer through action to the challenges that we are facing. When it comes to business, business needs a different kind of leadership. We cannot and we should not no longer looking at short term. We need to look at long term. We need to embed sustainability in business practices, and we need to make sustainability the core center and the center of driving business. And we have not been seeing that. We need a new generation of leaders in our business. We need leaders in business that really think that their companies, their business, they are part of the society. They are fundamental to ensure the sustainability of the planet, and business will be a key player really in ensuring that we will be leading in the right direction, not in the wrong direction. And finally, we need also citizens to take part on this by making both policymakers and business more accountable. We have been living in a world of promises. So every single summit that you see, you know, being the climate change summit, being the New York UN meeting General Assembly, what we see on those moments is that you see lots of companies, lots of different stakeholders. All of them, they come with very nice promises. But those promises are a moment. And no one is asking afterwards what is happening with those promises. And so promises are not solving the problem. We need action. We need to finish with this type of greenwashing era that we are living, and we really need to address and to be responsible and to act now. And acting now means reducing carbon now. That means action. That means solutions. That means really the innovations that will be leading us faster to a better world. And by the way, when we talk about green is not only about carbon emissions. So when we think about the ICT industry as a whole, we see that we have many different impacts. We have impacts on climate, we have impacts on supply chains, we have impacts on circular economy, we have impacts on privacy and security, and we also have impacts on what we call today the digital divide. So we need to embrace all those areas. We need to touch all those areas because those are intrinsic areas related with a green society, with a better world for us all. Digital technologies will be fundamental to address a better world in the future. But the same technology can be for good and can also be used for bad things. So we need to be aware of this. And therefore, we need to make sure that digital is being used for the good of the planet, for the good of people, and that those negative trends that we have identified, we address them and turn them into the right direction. And in this regard, what Jesse has been doing, we have really been moving away from what we know. We know that digital can be for good. We have that evidence. We know what digital can make. We know that digital technologies can reduce, for instance, 20% of the global emissions on business as usual. But we also know that that is not happening. So we need to accelerate. We need to do something different. And therefore, at Jesse, we decided to start what we call today the Digital with Purpose movement. And I would like to spend some time showing you what we are doing, starting with a short video that shows you what the movement is all about, and afterwards explaining you what are we planning to do in Jesse with our members, with many of the companies, many of the sectors, in order to take an action agenda that hopefully will respond in the next couple of years to the challenges that we are facing.
In evolutionary terms, all the technology that surrounds us today just happened yesterday. Innovations in energy, biology, chemistry, modern physics, transportation, and communications all evolved just a century ago, and it's accelerating. We must all ensure this evolution does not come at the cost of humanity or the planet. But the trends are heading the wrong way. Humankind and Earth face serious threats that require urgent intervention. Digital with Purpose is an ambitious movement exclusive to companies and leaders, committed to accelerating their positive impact and driving sustainable change through digital technology. It is a movement of leaders joining forces in a race to deliver against the Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. By giving technology a transformational role that puts the planet and humankind at its core, can we reverse the effects of climate change and positively impact our societies?
So this video gives you an overview of the ambition around Digital with Purpose. And as I mentioned to you, what we are designing here is a framework, is a tool, is an actionable agenda, which I would like to show to you as well, how we are designing this process. We did the Digital with Purpose report just a couple of years back in 2019. And this report showed again that digital technologies will be fundamental to address climate change and also the Sustainable Development Goals. The evidence was that digital technologies will be impacting positively 22% of the Sustainable Development Goals, and will be reversing the negative trend of 23% of them. So a great impact again. So as I said before, we have the evidence, we know what technology can do. The question is, how can we accelerate this process? Because we need to accelerate it. We cannot wait, as I said before, to 2050. We need digital technologies really to play its fundamental role to ensure the sustainability of the planet. And therefore, we decided to start the movement, but the movement with an ambition. And the ambition is about looking at the sky. And by this, what do I mean? I mean that when we decided to start this movement, we thought, well, we need to do something transformational. We need to understand where this industry can be to support sustainable development by 2030. And so we have been designing the movement and the framework with an ambition towards 2030. And by ambition, what do I mean? I give you an example. Ambition on climate is being net zero by 2030. Ambition on supply chains is, for instance, eradicate child labor in supply chains. Ambition on circular economy is really to get the companies to design for circular, to think products in a different manner, to really take back those products, put them back into business again. Or when it comes to privacy and security, is really about respecting ethical values, and it's about how do we deploy technologies for all to ensure that everybody has access to technology, to the internet, so they can have better education, better health, and so on and so on. And so this is the way that we have been designing the framework. And the framework is composed by three key pillars. The first pillar is about companies to embed sustainability in their operations. It's about the purpose. We know that most business, they have not been embedding sustainability in their operations, in procurement, in design, in marketing. So we need the companies really to understand this. We need the companies to embed, sustainability in business. The second layer is about digitally enabled solutions. And this is about the contribution of digital solutions to the other industry sectors. So we are developing a set of metrics that will help to deploy more innovations in the power sector, agriculture, health, education, and so on. And finally, the third layer is about responsible business. And here we developed a set of metrics to help companies to address their challenges on climate change, on privacy and security, on circular economy, digital inclusion, and supply chains. And so this framework, the digital repurpose movement, is not more than a tool. So what we are designing is a tool to help business really to go on a journey to achieve the sky, as I said before, by 2030. And this journey, it's up to the companies to decide how fast do they go. They can decide if they go slower or if they go faster. And for that, we developed what we call the recognition model of digital with purpose, that starts by a company committing to being a digital with purpose company. And I'm saying committing, I'm not saying promising, because the framework is not about promising anything. The framework is about committing to a journey where the companies say, I want to be part of this process. I have an ambition. I want to transform my business. I want to give a contribution to the challenges that we are facing in our society. I want my business to be sustainable. I want to provide sustainable products to my customers. I want to be a responsible business acting in a responsible manner in this world. And this is the way that we are designing the framework. Companies commit. Once they commit after 1 year, they start to fill in the metrics, and then they will be evaluated through their performance. And if they achieve 25 points in the scale, they will then be recognized with the stamp developing. If they achieve 70 or more, pioneering, and diamond. I tell you one thing, this is a very tough process. This is not something easy. This will be extremely challenging, but it's worth, because we will see lots of innovations, lots of creativity in the companies with different solutions in different areas, really to respond and to help to address the challenges that we are facing globally, and the challenges that we are facing also in Europe. And the good thing and the good news is that we have also a governance model here. We have an external panel of stakeholders helping us to design this process, which is independent from business. This panel is led by the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership and comprises many recognized stakeholders like CDP, the Columbia University, NL, the World Benchmarking Alliance, Circularity Capital, and with all these stakeholders, we will be designing and framing digital with purpose as we move forward. So We want these also to be strongly connected with the European Digital Green Coalition. The initiative of the Commission is extremely important and matches our ambition. What the European Commission is designing is a strong component of our framework, and it will be fundamental to our business as well. Digital with Purpose can be the sounding board of that process. And we hope that we will be working together with the European Commission, both the European Digital Green Coalition and Digital with Purpose, bringing these two initiatives together. One that is about designing the standard around enabling products and services, and Digital with Purpose as being the framework that will be then evaluating whether the companies and business is walking the talk or not. So I hope that I was able to show to you just how effective purpose-driven technology can be in addressing climate change. Today, I don't know if you saw it, but Politico published an article titled "How Climate Change Will Widen Europe's Divides." And this article paints a grim picture for the EU and the disproportionate ways in which countries will be affected if things continue with business as usual. We have the tools, the technical know-how, more than enough data, but we need leadership to drive this agenda. And as I said, that leadership will need to come from the private sector to deploy impactful technologies and to change the way that the sector is looking at driving business. The second is about ambitious governments to foster an environment that allows purpose-led companies to thrive. And finally, NGOs and citizens to keep all these actors accountable. I am hopeful that with initiatives like the Digital with Purpose movement and the European Green Digital Coalition, we can get there and work towards a more sustainable planet for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you for the speech, for the inspiration, for the alarm to action. We need that. And I see already a couple of questions. Just want to repeat to everybody, we have more than 420 people actually listening live, plus YouTube channel. Please, if you want to ask a question, go to Slido, sli.do, and put a hashtag #ActNow. You will see I'm already monitoring it on another screen, the questions. So I will ask questions that are been asked by Rebecca and Minda. If you, Luis, would change one policy in the context of climate change, what would that be? So suppose we have one silver bullet. What would you ask to be changed?
Well, from a policy standpoint, I would immediately, I'm too radical on this. I would implement immediately policies leading to net zero by 2030, 2040.
You would advance the net zero target.
I would advance the net zero target. I think that when we think about 2050, we need to think back and say, in 2015, we also thought about 2050. But meanwhile, 6 years are gone and not very much is happening. So we do not see any major thing happening. So we're not seeing emissions coming down. So we need really to advance these targets and put in place the measures and the policy measures that and the regulation that really accelerates this process.
So you see and you sense that the society, from political to industrial kind of leadership, they kind of feel that we have time, we will get there, it's not urgent. So you want to bring the sense of urgency.
Exactly. We need that, definitely. But we need also to move away from the lip service, because we see many people talking about the sense of urgency, and it's the sense of urgency. So this needs to be followed by specific measures which accelerate that and make sure that we have that sense of urgency taking place.
Yes. I think what is happening these days, like the 50 degrees in some cities in Canada, that will actually make people realize it's not tomorrow, it's not 2050 that they will feel the climate change. So they may associate. What you're saying also resonates in a way that a lot of maybe political minds or leadership have what I call a reptile brain. What is moving slowly, they don't see. I worked in demographic change, and that's such a slow moving mechanism, like a climate change was to them before, but it's not urgent. It always kind of is put as a second or third issue, not the emergency. So we need to bring it and make it a war situation, kind of emergency, so everybody see it because it's fast moving. That's kind of what I sense, but how do we avoid that we get into a green dictatorship? So climate change is everything, and suddenly economic and social issues may go aside. How do we square those three dimensions?
Well, you know, when I look at the digital technologies and I think about climate change, what I see is that digital technologies, if we would be addressing climate change and implementing more digital, actually we would be not only making the world better, because we can reduce emissions, but we also would make business. You know, in our Smarter 2030 report, the conclusion was 20% of the global emissions that we can enable through digital technologies represent the GDP of China. So we're talking about business as well. We are not endangering business. We are not leaving the business agenda. And that's why I do not understand the way that business is acting. So we are not really harnessing the opportunity of digital technologies, of digital innovation. So if we would embrace this agenda, actually, I think we will be making more money and creating a better, not only making more money, but creating a better world for everybody.
Right, the economic opportunity is definitely there. We see it. Very quickly, I will ask you maybe another two questions. One is why it takes so long for ICT world to design greener solutions. You were part of an ICT company before. Why does it take so long to either politicians to take mandatory measures, but the companies to do self-regulatory kind of greener option immediately to jump on that?
Well, green has not been an option, or let's say, in the focus of any company, to be honest. We have been talking about it for quite a long time. We have been undertaking some measures. I'm not saying that we have not been doing things. We have been doing some things, but it's not part of the core mindset of any company. And I repeat this. I don't think that leaders in companies, ICT companies, they have understood the potential of digital technologies in relation to green. So everything that one touches with a sustainability mindset in mind will have an immediate impact, an immediate benefit, positive benefit. And that has not been in the mindset of any CEO of any company. You see many CEOs talking about, we are doing this, we are doing that, you know, and they are doing. The problem is far from being enough. So they need to change the business model. They need really to embed sustainability in the core business to accelerate the green agenda, and not only in the top of the chain, but also in relation to what's coming down in the supply chains.
Right.
Where we see actually the biggest impact. So 2/3 of the emissions in the ICT industry are coming from the supply chain. So if you want to drive a green agenda from the top, you need really to put requirements on your suppliers to become and to be more greener. Otherwise, we will never get there.
Clear, it's all ecosystem, and the leaders of big ICT companies can do a lot. We already entertain them. We have the European Green Digital Coalition where they work how to work it out. So we have now avalanche of questions. What I will do, we go to the speeches, and we have plenty of time at the end to entertain, especially questions relating COVID and climate change. You know, can the COVID help us in a way? Is it an opportunity that we can restart in different ways? There are questions about greenwashing by ICT sector. So please do, if you have a way, read them and prepare, because we will address them once also Giga and Sanjana speak later. So let us now move to a second speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Giga Turk. He's at Ljubljana University. He holds degrees in engineering and computer science, and he's internationally recognized author and public speaker and lecturer on these subjects. He was a minister for growth, so he has a very good background in knowing how the political world works and how the issues work from growth agenda, but also with Minister of Education, Science, Culture and Sport in the government of Slovenia. And he was also Secretary General of the Felipe González Reflection Group on the Future of Europe. So he's also a member of the Academic Council of the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies. So Giga, floor is yours. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ilias, for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Indeed, we have to act now, and my presentation will, yes, we have to act, but where to act, how to act. I think there's an area that kind of can deliver quickly, inexpensively, efficiently, but it needs some assistance, it needs some innovation, development, etc. Also related to what the good people at Connect have been supporting for a long time. So basically, the outline of my presentation is, yes, it's no doubt about it. It's getting warmer. Something needs to be done. And there's a solution industry out there called construction. There will be no solutions without tackling what is happening in the built environment. But the question is, the issue is, can construction deliver? And there are issues there to be delivered, to be improved. It can deliver with digital platforms. So let me get to the first part. I think it's really not necessary. It's really not important to convince people, to convince this audience that it is getting warmer. This is a picture of temperature anomalies, and you have a number of charts like this. And still you would have skeptics that would say, oh, but it's not warming, look at the weather, how bad it was, how cold it was the other day, etc., etc. To these people, I say, look at the glaciers in the Alps, look at the tree lines in the mountains in the Alps, they are getting up, glaciers are melting. These are results of some long-term trends, which are pretty obvious. For every kind of heat wave in Canada, you have some cold wave somewhere, but the melting of ice, of long-term ice, or of trees moving uphill, I think that should be convincing to just about anyone that things are getting out of hand. It is due to greenhouse gas emissions. This chart tells you how these emissions have evolved over the past 250 years. We are here. The European Union, the 28, this was a little dated chart, the 28 are this. And if you would look at the historical kind of sum of all of that, it was a lot of our greenhouse gases that are powering the current warning. So it's entirely, I think, correct and clear that the EU is extremely ambitious when it comes to greening the planet. So it's striving to be the first climate neutral continent, which means zero net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. It means that the economic growth is decoupled from resource use. And this should not be at the expense of welfare of social policies, so no person and no place is left behind. And frankly, we have been doing something. We do have some results to show. It was not that we have been, totally ignorant of the problem. If you look at the events over the last couple of decades, actually since the 1990s, we did some reductions of the greenhouse gases. 2050 is here. Okay, so we want to get to zero in this short period of time, and there is a need of a break in the trends. We will need to go much steeper in the years to come. And what the rest of the world will be doing, Some people would say, oh, but you know, what is this? You know, what's the matter? What is it if we do this here when you have all this stuff up here? Well, it will be an example that it is possible, and that it is possible in a way where you preserve your standard of living, your standards of education, of healthcare, the welfare systems, etc., etc. It will be an example and a pressure of all the others. But the task still is, you know, in my background, I'm not a politician, I'm an engineer, I'm not a social scientist, I'm an engineer. We operate with kind of hard numbers. It's the physics, it's the Newton laws that are kind of restricted, are kind of restricting what we are doing in building and construction. It's ambitious, you know. It's ambitious because the last time we were climate neutral, we lived something like that. So definitely we know how to be climate neutral. The question is how to be climate neutral and preserve the quality of life that we are used to. And this is what this presentation is actually about. The huge part of the solution will come from the construction industry. This is the construction industry is aware that it is part of the solution, that it has to, and it will do something about it. This is a part of the construction manifesto for action that was done by FIEC, by the European Federation of Construction Industry, where I sit leading a working group on construction 4.0 there. You see there, the slogan is construction is the solutions industry, and it's a solution industry with respect to climate. Let's revisit, you know, this chart of European Commission that tells us, okay, so where the action will be, what will we be doing? And one of the 8 elements is the building and renovating in an energy and resource efficient way. But this is by far not the only element which is kind of indirectly related to construction. Supplying clean, affordable, and secure energy. This will be delivered through structures, installations, etc., etc., that will be constructed, built by the construction industry. And if I miss or skip all the others, accelerating the shift to sustainable and smart mobility. Where do we move? What is our mobility? It's the roads, it's the railways, it's the airports, it's the harbors, all built, constructed, maintained by construction industry. And frankly, if we look at where the past savings, past success of the climate action of Europe have been in the past over the last 30 years or so, it was in the buildings where we achieved something like 25% reduction of energy use. Industry did even more, but this also includes the effect of exporting a lot of our kind of dirty CO2 intensive industry abroad. And you're not saving the planet if you just move production from Europe to someplace else. Electricity production also greener, with more windmills, with more photovoltaic, with more hydro, and less of the underground fuels. If you're still not convinced, it's construction industry that does design, construction, operations, and maintenance of buildings. And it is inside of these buildings that about 40% of all energy is used. 40%. Residential, 25, a quarter of all energy in residential buildings, and the rest in services and commercial buildings. A third in transport. Construction-related elements, construction-related topics. And it's important to still, we talk about global warming, we talk about climate. But the previous speaker was saying, people don't realize this is the problem number one. Actually, if you ask people, they did a UN survey a couple of years ago, surveying 8.5 million people across the world, and they were asking them, what is your priority? What do you expect from your governments, etc. And they put good education as number one, better healthcare as number two, better job opportunities as number three, more honest and responsive governments as number four, etc., 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 etc. And down here, action taken on climate change. So governments have resources, politicians have, well, they collect taxes and they have money to distribute. And climate will never be the only thing to be a candidate for taxpayers' money. So it is extremely important to be aware of the fact that there is more than one problem that humanity has to solve. So we need to have economic solutions to solve a problem. And the important thing to realize is that construction can deliver these solutions basically at negative cost. It does not cost at all. This is a fairly old diagram that was done by McKinsey and Vattenfall. And what it shows is the area of a particular rectangle tells you the potential. So how much CO2 can you save using this improvements in this or that technology? And whether it is drawn down of the zero line or up of the zero line, it tells you what is the related cost to doing that. And in this orange area here, you have a lot of construction or buildings related measures that have a negative cost. So you take CO2 out of circulation, you reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and you still save money. So you have money left for all the social policies and for all the other stuff from the previous chart that people are also interested in. And this also gives you a kind of policy blueprint. So what policies would you want to have to tackle climate change? If something is negative cost, you have to educate people, you have to advertise it, you can legislate and standardize, you can say, look, buildings should be this and this, to this and this level energy efficient. It will save you money. We can put a law in that. We're not creating any special costs. For this area here, which is green, it means it costs something, but it does not cost absurdly a lot. It's not extremely expensive. Well, you can make these things more attractive by tax breaks. And when you get to the more expensive part here, what you want to do is, not subsidize something that is extremely expensive and, well, it brings you something, but not all that much. You want to be spending your money here. But what you can do is subsidize or fund R&D that would drive the costs down. And this is what, also European program Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, and so on come into play. Drive down the costs of these technologies here that can bring something, but are currently too expensive. And here, construction is in the negative cost area. Some people said this was an analysis done by Deutsche Bank, actually, where to put money, where should people invest? They should invest in construction because it's a double winner of global warming, of climate change. Double winner in the sense that work needs to be done to adapt to warmer, drier climate, etc. And work needs to be done to reduce the emissions. So how to do that? Well, in brief, because the audience is not kind of construction related. In brief, you want to do better design, you want to do better construction, you want to do better reconstruction, you want to build everything using kind of life cycle assessment of building products, new and existing, and the smarter operation with intelligent buildings that have sensors and kind of optimize energy use to the well-being of the users. Smart cities, which kind of integrate the buildings, the traffic, the life of citizens, and optimize it in the sense that it preserves the quality of life and reduces the use of energy. Digital, speaking to DG Connect, Open University, digital is key. And there are two kind of big elements of digital in this area. One element of digital is the project information management. So for the new stuff, for the stuff that you plan to do, for the stuff that will be built, renovated, etc. And there is asset information management. So for all the stuff that you have already, the assets, the buildings, the railways, the roads, you want to manage it better with information. So can construction deliver? Definitely there are huge opportunities out there, but can it deliver? Is it up to the task? Is it up to the job? And unfortunately, construction lacks in the implementation of the digital. So imagine the huge footprint, buildings and all stuff related to construction, the huge impact everything has on the climate, on the emissions. Imagine the huge opportunity that lies in the digital, and then combine that to the fact that construction is actually the second least digitized sector that we have. I think this should result in a very clear priority to digitize the construction sector and to digitize the built environment. And that this should bring actually very quick, very fast, very efficient wins in order to implement that. The fact is that not all construction is so backward when it comes to digital. The productivity growth of construction that does, kind of big organized industrial buildings, big apartment buildings, etc. In these areas, in the areas of big firms, construction is quite advanced in digital as well. It's the small trades, the SMEs, the kind of trades way of doing things that is dragging things down. And here we need a technological breakthrough. Here we need a technological revolution. And luckily, we have it. Technology is out there. We could improve the technology delivery mechanism to all these small and medium enterprises on which basically the construction industry rests. The problem is that construction is one of these sectors that is not yet industrialized. It cannot take the benefit of repetition that is so good, that is so beneficial, that is so efficient in many other industries. If you look through the window, you see construction products, and they will be one-of-the-kind products. Every building is unique. Every bridge is unique. Every road is unique. It was built in a unique process. It was built in a unique team. It was built by a unique value chain. There is always the search for the lowest common denominator of technology. There is a search. Every project is starting from scratch. There is a limited project-to-project evolution. There are limited benefits that you take from one project to the next project. And can construction deliver? Yes, it can deliver using the platform paradigm, something that appeared in in private use of information technology recently and can be very effective for construction as well. I like this quote from Bill Gates. It's from the 1990s. He said, "As we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those that empower others. And those that will empower the construction industry to be more digital, they will do wonders to the environment and to the environmental footprint." Empowerment came in many shapes and sizes. You know how the platform economy works. The idea is that you build some infrastructure between the internet and the particular services. This platform can assist you in marketing, in monetization, but most importantly, it helps you in technology, it helps you in innovation. You have something to build on, and more importantly, different services can kind of learn from each other. What happens is kind of complementary innovation. So these platforms, they simplify collaboration, they reduce transaction costs, but most importantly, innovation kind of explodes. If you look at what is happening, the effect that, for example, YouTube had on video makers, you know, it was an explosion of creativity because they were in parallel inventing things, not to mention platforms like Android, not to mention platforms like Etsy or GitHub or things like that. So we are looking forward. I mean, my core research area is in building construction informatics, construction information technology. We are looking forward to next step, next generation of productivity games, where projects would not be something that is done, construction project would not be something that is done, few people come together, information comes together, resources come together for a couple of years, and then everything is dismantled and you start from scratch, you start anew. The idea is that we build a platform, and on this platform, construction gets industrialized, learning becomes persistent, reuse of information, reuse of knowledge is persistent, and in this way you can industrialize an industry that is vital to tackling climate change. And this is what also we are doing in this whole stream of research, which is called Construction 4.0, and which is well aligned with the industrial policies that European Union is advocating. It is about this collaborative economy that Jyrki Katainen was speaking about when he was saying, well, maybe Europe's next unicorn could stem from collaborative economy. The kind of understanding is maybe Europe cannot compete with the United States, cannot compete with the United States when it comes to consumer platforms, but we can develop industrial platforms to keep our industry competitive, but also green. And this holds for construction as well. And Max Lemke from the Commission, he was very clear in saying that business-to-business platforms, this is the race Europe cannot afford to lose. So in conclusion, we need to act. Net zero cannot be delivered without construction industry, without doing something about the built environment. But the question is, what kind of construction industry? This industry will need to step up digitalization so that it can deliver the potential that is clearly there. It needs to step up the digitalization of building processes and of managing the built infrastructure. So what is already there and how much energy is used in what exists already. The platforms look like the most promising way to deliver this technology. They enable the reuse and the recycling, and in this case, not of material stuff, but of information, of knowledge. And this is what, this is actually this trajectory on which the flourishing of the mankind is built on. Reuse of knowledge, recycling of knowledge. The future was charted by a very interesting Horizon 2020 project we just finished. It was called DigiPlace, a CSA type of project, where we charted what directions things should be going, what the next research and other problems are. Yes, more knowledge will be needed as well. And with this, I conclude this presentation.
Thank you, Žiga. Thank you very much. I can tell that the engineer and the politician molded, I mean, the amalgamation in you is very, very unique and very good. So you can deliver political messages through very engineering way of presenting it. So it was excellent. Now, talking about that climate change is not the only problem that people have. It's also that climate change and circularity is not the only problem to construction. that has to deal with pressures worldwide, pressures. Imagine that half of the cities of 2050 have not been built yet. And if we don't do that in a greener way, the natural resource needed will be huge. So imagine just China in few years, 2010, 2015, like within few years, spent as much cement, use as much cement as US during the all of 20th century. So you can imagine the growth that is coming up with the growth of the population and the needs and the requirement by people for well-being and all that. So imagine the demographic and the need of construction to take care of the independent living and problems of the aging. And so it's a multiple problem also on the construction that we need to deal with and try to see win-win situations.
Yes, and I can imagine also the potential. You're absolutely correct. It's the majority of mankind that still has to move into cities, which are a kind of more sustainable way of living than in this urban sprawl or the villages and the things like that. This still has to be constructed. And there is a huge opportunity if you have the technologies to do this in a modern, sustainable, energy efficient way. So it's an opportunity for European construction industry, for construction managers, for material producers, for component producers, for architects, engineers, etc., etc. So if we are the first in this trend, we will have the whole world as a market.
Because in Europe, it's mostly about renovations, but the world, it's opportunity to build greener in a way.
Exactly. But also when you speak about renovations, I have shown that chart where we did something in buildings. We now use 25% energy less in buildings than we used to 30 years ago. It is something. But we did, the energy retrofitting of the simple buildings where you have, simple flat areas, you put some insulation on top, change the windows, and that is it. But in Europe, we also have a lot of architecturally interesting buildings with a lot of details, which you cannot just plaster some insulation on it, but you need robotics, computer visions, scan to 3D models, scan to BIM, so that all these intricate details can be preserved when you improve the energy performance of that building. Plus, in many areas, including Slovenia, Italy, many others, when you do energy efficiency of buildings, you want to improve earthquake safety at the same time. You want to improve probably the entire Eastern Europe. You have a lot of existing buildings where the standard of facilities, the square footage of stuff is rather small. And if you have intelligent tools that are now coming out for design and for building, you can do these complex things, you can do these unique things, these things which are on site, which used to be built in a kind of craftsmanship way on industrial scale using IT. But all technology is still not developed.
It's good that you mentioned that. We will go quickly to the questions. But when you do digitalization of a building with energy efficiency in mind, and we have some statistics that show, from 17-20% efficiency, just making it smart and knowing, the windows and the heating and all the parameters around smart homes. When you do that, you should also have in mind that tomorrow's buildings will be our education place, our health care place. So it's about telehealth, teleeducation, telework. So the digitalization is there for multiple purpose again. So it has to serve many other things in the building than energy efficiency. So once we go to that building, so since we are entering and putting the optical fibers and the smartness, think bigger. And construction industry should somehow take it upon themselves to offer more portfolio of options when it comes to digitalization of a building.
And it is doing that, it is doing that with big steps, but it has some structural problems. We speak in the kind of construction community a lot about it. Why is it so unfriendly to innovation? And it's because of this lack of industrial leadership. If you have a BMW, they can push some innovations through their entire value chain. because these value chains are much more static, much more persistent than something that happens on one project that lasts for a couple of years. But the challenge is there, and you said this last session is about, delivering. In the end, it will have to be the construction industry that will be delivering that.
Yeah, it's one of the critical one. If I had to choose three, it's one of the three: energy, construction, transport. Those are the kind of the top.
And the gap in the digitalization, okay, some people see the gap. Some people see that it is at the end. I see the opportunity. Imagine what it could do if you raise it up.
So let us go to a couple of questions before we go to the next speaker. And at the end, we will have again time to entertain some of the questions. There is one very specific that I will say, but there is also one very general. So on the specific one, how has BREEAM and LEED certification as a tool in the construction sector fared in embracing true sustainability and delivery on climate excellence? So that's kind of, I guess you understand what BREEAM and LEED are. Huh?
If you want to improve something, you have to measure it. And this is what these methods are doing. Now, it's not the end of the line. It's not the it's not optimal, but it is getting you some information, and it is getting you some guidelines, some targets into which the designers should be striving at, to get to A+++ kind of buildings in the end.
Very good. And there is a question from Alex that already was there for about half an hour ago. Which narratives, so that's more tapping into your political experience, which narratives are more effective when trying to raise awareness on climate change to the societies?
I think people are different, psychologically different, and there may not be a single answer to this question. For some people, fear works. To other people, and this end of the world stories would maybe make a difference. To other people, I think that what also works is the optimism, the kind of can do. We can do it. It's not possible. It's a challenge. We did a lot of challenges in the past. We will do this as well. Actually, we are running out of challenges. Let's take this upon us as a challenge to also to create jobs, and not just to create jobs to do something, but to create opportunities for people to be innovative, to be creative, to find self-fulfillment, if you want.
Yes,
so I don't think there is kind of one overreaching narrative that will pull everyone. You talk to one community with this language, you talk to another community with that language. You simply put taxes, CO2 tax on stuff for those who would not understand anything, but they understand if it's more expensive. So I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix that is needed.
Culturally dependent, very much culturally dependent. There is a relevant question, I'm going to say it. So have you actually seen during your years as a minister a change, or as a professor, change in the media, the way they portray climate change? Have you seen kind of a change from back of the mind to emergency or other type of changes?
I have definitely seen more talk about this, but I am seeing, in my view, for too long a time, that the way to go seems to be, the recipe seems to be, let's put very ambitious targets in a just about distant future. So let's do something ambitious, but 20 years from now or 40 years from now. And this seems to be moving along, a little bit like fusion energy, it's always like 30 years from now, and now is shifting. So I think it's it's important to try to do something doable now, and not replace the now with a more ambitious far future.
Very good. And that's what Luis was trying to make as a big point. So thanks for repeating, and that you're both on the same page. And that's true for many things. AI was like that for many years. Now, is that now the time? Fusion is still being pushed 20 years to the quantum computing is now pushed 20 years. Let's see in 20 years if we will push another 20. So we'll see how all that goes, but we cannot afford anymore. And same with demographic change and the societal change. We cannot just push it for the next generation again.
Yeah, but frankly, we will be doing two things in parallel. We will be adapting to warmer because it will be a couple of hundred years maybe before it gets cooler.
That's for sure.
And we will be reducing the footprint.
And that is the construction challenge number whatever.
Adaptation. Also, and it is the challenge for the whole of the world. It's if we can somehow influence, the developing countries not to take the same kind of careless patterns that we had in the last century, but build it on a sustainable technology. That would make a difference.
Right. I will introduce a new speaker. We will have one more speaker that actually couldn't make it in the morning session, but it's very exciting, and we are very happy to have her with us. But there is a very specific question for you from Mark. It'll be put in a chat so you can look at it, and we come back to it at the end. Okay. So it's my pleasure to introduce Sanjana Paul, co-founder and executive director of Earth Hack. Very nice that you could make it actually. Sanjana Paul is the executive director and co-founder of Earth Hack, as I said, and she's currently a researcher at MIT's Senseable City Lab. She has worked at NASA. She has worked with NSF at NASA Atmospheric Science as a researcher, I guess, in extreme ultraviolet engineering at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and Conservation Innovation Fellow at Conservation X Labs. So a lot of experience, a lot of exciting stuff. Let's hear from you, Sanjana.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. Hopefully you can see my screen. And so I'd like to talk with you today about a whole bunch of different topics, I think, because by its very nature, I think it's very interdisciplinary sort of field, both in terms of the environment and in terms of hackathons, which is what we do at Earth Hacks, my organization. So as was mentioned, my name is Sanjana. So I am the co-founder and executive director of Earth Hacks, and what I'd mostly like to speak with you about today centers around environmental innovation in the 21st century, kind of touching upon hackathons, touching upon this concept of eco-entrepreneurship, and more, some of the kind of guiding principles of our organization. So before we dive in, what is a hackathon? Because I said it probably 5 times in the last 30 seconds, and so I want to make sure that we kind of all start on the same foot. So typically, hackathons are programming competitions. They take place over a weekend. Oftentimes, especially in the last decade, they're aimed at students, primarily college students, but sometimes high school students, younger children. It's open to professionals as well. They're very wide-ranging. So they kind of got their start in the open source software movement, with people essentially just trying to skill share, trying to teach each other. And it's really rooted in the concept of rapid prototyping, rapid development, of creating essentially something from nothing, which is a concept very dear to my heart because I trained as an engineer and kind of joined this space to kind of see what we could build in response to climate change. So Earth Hacks actually got its start in 2018 with a group of students, primarily engineering students, trying to ask, how can we take the time-intensive hackathon innovation model and apply it to the time-sensitive issue of climate change and all of the associated environmental problems it brings with it. Because it's not just that the climate is fundamentally changing due to human activity, it's also the effects that we have to live with, which are far-reaching and which are going to touch every aspect of our lives if they haven't already. For example, in Boston in the United States, where I am, we just came out of our second extreme heat wave in a month that led to just incredibly elevated temperatures and health issues and things like that. So a really core part of our theory of change with environmental hackathons, and harnessing this innovation model of rapid prototyping and development for environmental issues is that hackathons are going to happen anyways. It's absolutely incredible to see with the rise of the internet, with the widespread adoption of digital technologies, new types of learning becoming available, becoming more commonplace, including the experiential learning you see at hackathons spread across the globe. So, I mean, if you search on the internet, you will see hundreds, if not thousands, of them taking place all over the world every single year, and hundreds, if not thousands, of participants. So that means you have hundreds of thousands of people who are being exposed to the themes at hackathons. So why not use them as an opportunity to put environmental issues at the forefront? Why not use them as an opportunity to equip students to become environmental leaders, and to use them as an opportunity to create a culture shift, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a couple of minutes, in the STEM space, the science, technology, engineering, mathematics space, and really center environmental issues at the core of everything we do. Because most aspects of our industrialized society are going to have to change, as some of the previous speakers talked about. There can't really be any business as usual until environment being centered in everything is business as usual. So if I haven't convinced you, why we're interested in using hackathons as a vehicle for climate action, there's a whole list of different factors that probably wouldn't fit on a single slide, a couple of slides. I think that could be a discussion in and of itself. But some of the main ones, the main benefits that we really feel that hackathons have the potential to sort of push forward as a tool for climate action, is that they're very interdisciplinary environments. You never have people from exactly the same background in a hackathon. You have people of all different skill levels, all different interests, things like that. They are fundamentally very democratic, community-centric problem-solving spaces. People will talk to each other. Oftentimes, if it's more of a competitive hackathon, even though teams that have formed to work on specific challenges are technically competing against each other, they'll still talk to each other, they'll still exchange ideas, they'll still help each other. They're breeding ground for new ideas. Again, you come in at the beginning of the weekend, sometimes with not even an idea, and you leave with a working prototype or a fully formed first step towards making it implemented. They're really interesting in terms of access to resources. Oftentimes you'll have mentors at hackathons who can serve as subject matter experts for various challenges that participants are working on. They have an educational focus, which I guess in hindsight, hopefully lends less pressure to working on these issues than if you're in a class or if you're in a professional training course. And lastly, one thing that Earth Hacks in particular has really taken interest in is focusing on environmental justice in the nexus of the digital and the environmental space, and using hackathons as a vehicle to insert this concept of environmental justice into the digital space and into the technology space. So I'll circle back to that a little bit and how it fits into, how it needs to fit into any sort of environmental innovation, digital or I guess analog, in the 21st century. But first, I'd like to take you on a little bit of a detour into kind of some of the guiding principles or guiding questions of what we do with the organization. So you're going to get to see kind of the core, to use an Earth analogy, of what our principles are, whereas most people will get to see just the surface, which is the final product of hackathons. So everything that I've said leading up to this point, talking about the concept of hackathons, talking about the opportunity to use hackathons as a vehicle for climate action at the nexus of digital space and sustainability, is kind of centered for us around this question of who gets to be an innovator in the 21st century. So, the words innovation and the word innovator, they're very loaded terms sometimes. They mean very different things to very different people. And so this question was, I think, in a somewhat differently worded sense, very present in the original hackathon movement. Who gets to be a programmer? Anyone should be able to teach someone else how to do this. We should all be able to learn from each other. So redirecting that a little bit onto kind of climate action, climate tech specifically, climate innovation, again, loaded term, and all the development around that, who we consider to be innovators can take a lot of different meanings. It could be the 19-year-olds participating in hackathons. It could be politicians. It could be leaders of tech companies. And so we're not the first people to ask this question. And I think really it depends on what we look at as innovation, which is a very, very, I guess, fundamental question when we're designing a hackathon, and a very fundamental question we encourage student participants to ask themselves at hackathons is, what is innovation? Is it purely apps? Applications for your phone, your computer, new ways of using software in the digital space? Is it websites, no matter what form they take? Is a new website created, and is that innovation? The Internet of Things as a concept is just being able to put sensors on more and more items, or having your kitchen appliances be able to tweet innovation in the 21st century? Or is it just this very nebulous sort of loose phrase of tech? And is anything tech considered innovation? And is that constraining in some ways? So when you look at it very closely with regards to something like climate, especially as it intersects with the digital space, it sometimes begins to break down a little bit. That innovation doesn't necessarily have one meaning. It really means a lot of different things depending on the specific aspect of climate change at the nexus of whatever other angle you're looking at it through with whatever other issue. Because climate change is such a far-reaching problem, and digital technology is so pervasive in the 21st century that it touches everything, that when you look at the intersections of these two huge things, standard definitions sometimes don't work. So asking these questions, sorry, a little bit ahead, asking these questions very intentionally, asking these questions very often, and asking these questions in every case, whether it's, a case of us designing a hackathon to figure out how we can push solutions forward, or whether it's students who we're supporting in developing hackathon challenges, or whether it's students working at hackathons themselves. This question of what actually is innovation with regards to climate and climate tech is very important. As important of this question kind of about who gets to be an innovator and how we sort of push that forward in a just way. So it looks like we mixed up a couple of slides, so I'll jump over here. So in terms of who gets to be an innovator, with this very loose concept of innovation, we might have to ask the question, who bears the costs of innovation, which can be a very uncomfortable question. And so it's a question that's sometimes avoided, especially in sort of these educational innovation and disruption spaces. When we push forward new technologies, when we push forward new development of any sort, who bears the costs of their development? Sometimes it's people, sometimes it's the planet, and most often it's both. And one of the previous speakers was speaking about, the emissions embedded, for example, in the supply chain of different products. But there's also kind of human and social issues embedded in supply chains of many products, of many practices, and things like that. And so these issues of environment, sustainability, and I guess social issues and human rights are really not separate. They're very fundamentally intertwined. So, with that in mind, thinking about how we solve the issues that climate change has caused, we have to be very careful not to only address the immediate problems we're seeing, such as extreme heat, for example, but also to be very, very mindful of the power structures and the cultural elements that have led to those drivers of climate change-induced problems, and that have led to those things being sort of prioritized and protected, and think carefully. Whenever we develop innovations, whatever they may be, whatever that word means to you, to your community, are we continuing these harmful practices that have actually been driving climate change and putting band-aids on immediate solutions that we see? Or are we truly trying to innovate deeply? And are we moving forward towards a more resilient, equal, and just society, which is good for people and the planet and for just our sustained growth as a species? So this kind of brings us back to a fundamental concept that I mentioned earlier that's really embedded in the work that we do through our environmental hackathons, and that needs to be centered more in the environmental space as a whole, this concept of environmental justice. So Dr. Robert Bullard, who's a sociologist who is really one of the people who, started this field in the last century, kind of defines this principle of environmental justice, saying that, all people are entitled to equal environmental protection, regardless of race, color, or national origin. It's the right to live and work and play in a clean environment. And so it's a principle that all people and communities have a right to equal protection and equal enforcement of environmental laws and regulations. And so this concept, it seems very basic. When I first came across it, I thought, of course, that makes perfect sense, but it's not something that we've managed to accomplish. So in thinking about how we push solutions forward and thinking about how we support the next generation of people who are coming into both the innovation space and just into the world, we have to consider this concept of environmental justice and how we're going to uphold it so that any form of green recovery, such as the ones that have been spoken about, any form of kind of moving into a more resilient world, centers the rights of people and makes sure that everyone has the opportunity to enjoy it. So we've talked about hackathons. We've talked about innovation, what it may mean. We've talked about who bears the cost of innovation, and all in the context of kind of the intersection of the climate, the digital, and tech spaces, and we've talked about environmental justice. So where do we go from here? Because these are a lot of concepts that touch kind of a lot of different aspects across the spectrum of environmentalism. So hopefully we go forward. We have to carefully ask questions about how we combine these elements, like this one. How can we use hackathons and innovation and entrepreneurship practices to drive a shift in the digital and tech space towards sustainability? And we have to think about what vehicles we use to drive them forwards, like hackathons, including being open to entirely new types of innovation or perhaps overlooked types of innovation, one of which we believe is culture. So actually shifting culture in tech, shifting culture in the environmental space might be really key, might be really fundamental, might be a really important aspect of how we tackle these really intersectional issues. So I mentioned that that's one of our focuses at Earth Hacks is shifting the culture in sort of the tech space. And one of the main frameworks that we use to do this is called the Overton Window, which those who are in politics may be familiar with. So the Overton Window is this concept of politically acceptable discourse. It's a really nice visualization kind of saying whatever is in this Overton window is politically acceptable to talk about. You see it mentioned in mainstream politics, you see it in the news all the time, you see it in legislation all the time. And whatever is outside of the Overton window is seen as too radical, is seen as too far, quote unquote, out there, seen as something that's not feasible, not realistic. We've seen a huge shift in the Overton window in the past 10, 15 years with regards to climate. When I was a kid, it was just kind of unheard of to center climate change in political discourse. You never would have heard political leaders speak about a climate emergency or a green recovery, but now it's everywhere. Now you can't read the news without seeing something about it, and this is good. So we've seen this culture, we've seen that policy is finally starting to catch up. But the question, again, that has been brought up in many discussions here is how do we drive that same shift, that same culture shift, that same discourse shift in kind of the technology space where, yes, we're talking about new tech development, we're talking about new projects, new innovation, but we're talking about it entirely in the context of climate change, entirely in the context of environmental issues, entirely in the context of centering human rights, racial justice, environmental justice, gender justice, and all of these intertwined things in how we move forward. So with that, I'll stop for now because I've thrown so much information at you and I'm very excited to see some of the questions and responses here. But I'd like to leave you with this question of who gets to be a climate innovator? Who gets to sit at that nexus of costs and opportunities and access and exclusion and develop tools and frameworks and ways of being that will hopefully not only allow us as a species to survive climate change, but mitigate the worst effects and adapt to the amount that's already occurred? And more specifically, how can you be a climate innovator? And how can you make space for those who would have otherwise been excluded? So with that, I will stop. My contact information, as well as the information for my organization, is here. We love interfacing with people about these issues, and much of our philosophy and much of our development has been developed from conversations with our community. So look forward to hearing from you. I will stop sharing my screen, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjana. That was excellent. And one of the major kind of added value of a Connect University like this is that people can follow up with the speakers. So you may actually experience that people will do contact you. They link with you through different social media. So, and that's what we offer as a possibility. If you really want to link, please do. So we have the participants that may actually follow up on this. Thank you for the speech. Thank you for linking the justice and the social issues and the green. That's essential. As we always say, it's actually the triplet, the economy, society, environment, that have to be kind of through digital advanced all at the same time, not some dimensions on the expense of the others. So sometimes we do have environmental progress on the expense of social progress. So we cannot afford that. In the past, the digital progress was very much on the expense of the environment, so we cannot afford that either. So it becomes a little bit more complex, but there are ways. And we saw, like Giga already explained, in construction, we can even do it with a negative cost. So that's kind of a new concept, that we can also entertain. There are several questions that are now addressed to all of you, okay? So one of them actually that is very much on the multidisciplinarity can go, that's from Karin. The diverse competence and experience being pivotal to deliver groundbreaking solutions. How can other initiatives integrate these principles to include others? So how can we mainstream the interdisciplinarity in a way? And that also addresses the question you ask, who can be climate innovator? It's not that somebody has to study climate, you see? How do we actually make everybody feel that they can be engineers, artists, sociologists, whoever, I'm sure has a shot at it, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I apologize for the background noise. I think that really what you said is very important, because we can't depend on a single discipline of people to address climate issues, because environmental issues are everyone's issues, right? They're going to affect everyone in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter whether you studied geology or theology. So I think really it's kind of this concept that we hear about in higher education a lot is this concept of silos, right? Of different disciplines being completely isolated from each other. And it's, yes, breaking down those silos, but also not really acknowledging them in the first place. If we approach climate change issues, environmental issues from a problems perspective as opposed to a discipline perspective, I think we stand a much better chance of having, one, interdisciplinary participation, and two, then more robustness in the solutions, because that narrows the possibility of us overlooking different things. So this is very fundamental, actually, so to how we design our hackathon problems. We never say, computer science majors, can you please work on an app? And, graphic design majors, can you please work on marketing for an app? We always say, hey, we have this specific problem. Let's say accessibility regarding urban farming. You all get to work on it with whatever, you think your individual skills and contributions to these issues are. So I think extending that issue, again, just focusing on the problems instead of the disciplines, is one of the key ways in which we can kind of advance that.
Very good. Giga, I promised to come back to that, but it's actually from Mark. It's not a question, it's just a statement that I guess the German construction standards may be of the highest quality. So I don't know if standards per se, and that's a question to all of you, how important are the standards if you want to get in construction, but everywhere? Huh? It's the standards in ICT development and ICT's impact on environment, how important standards are to you. So that'll be kind of a last question to all of you, and then we go into closing statements because we are up to the hour already. So maybe
no, the DGNB is a very good illustration how the industry is actually aware of the issue, of the problem, also of the client demand, and is trying to, yes, standards are actually great, except that standardize what is there already. And what I liked of the last presentation very much is this focus on innovation. Who gets to be innovator? The beauty of the current fact, or the good thing about the current fact that there are, I don't know, 8-9 billion people on Earth, is that there are 8-9 billion of innovators that can, if they work together, solve bigger problems than 100 million or 50 million population can solve.
Very good. Luis, the standards on ICT and impact, we've been together in meetings where we need to actually clarify the impact of ICT and drive the positive scenarios. You are muted.
Yes, thank you. No, I was saying we do need standards, and so when we think, for instance, in the work that we are now, or that Elias, you started with the European Green Digital Coalition on the enabling side. So it's important that we have a common framework that allows us to measure in a very clear and transparent manner the impact of digital technologies to help other sectors to become more efficient, to measure that, to quantify that. That's one example. Also from let's say from the responsible side, how we design also equipment and infrastructure, the solutions with a specific mindset about becoming greener and so on. So you need guidance, and we have been doing that in the ICT industry, more on, let's say, what I call the responsible area side than in the enabling side. I think what is lacking to us now is really to have this enabling, let's say, standardized approach that will really help also the other sectors to better understand what is the benefit of digital into their industries, because that will accelerate also probably innovations and so on. So definitely that's something that I think we need.
Very good. And when we think of standards, Sanjana, it's not only standards about material and the processes, it's also standards for financial industry to support innovation. So, and there is a big shift, and a lot of financial institutions would like to fund innovators. In Germany, 20% of the startups are around climate solutions, so it's there, and the kind of systemic and more systemic support to them is important. What do you observe in your space? I mean, how are the climate innovators supported or ignored?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think this concept of standards, as you said, it doesn't, similar to pretty much everything with climate, it doesn't limit to just one field. Certainly, you're seeing an increasing wave of calls for applications, of requests for proposals, for funding, for access to resources, for support. I think especially over the last year, very interestingly, because of COVID perhaps, or despite COVID, we've seen an increasing sort of call for a lot of things like this. But one thing that's really interesting is that I think that only looks at one facet of innovation. And it's great to see that there's support for it. It's great to see that there's support for startups, for beginning new things. But what about internal innovation? What about innovation that takes place at existing organizations, existing companies that have established humongous carbon footprints? What about innovations at universities? What about innovations in the government? I think it's also very interesting that when we say, again, who gets to be a climate innovator, it's not just the people who have the time, the resources, the capability to start a business from scratch, to start a nonprofit organization from scratch, which is very important, which is very impressive, but also thinking about how can we make it more standard, more acceptable to look at this sort of internal innovation and to look at how we can transform existing things, which is sometimes more difficult because you have existing processes, procedures, and you might feel that you need to break out of them. So I do think that it is becoming more standard to kind of see this call for especially youth innovators. And I'd be really interested in seeing how the financial industry responds to internal innovation, as well as how I think my home field of electrical engineering, of information technology, creates more green standards in response to the realities of what we're seeing. For example, the repairability index that some electronics are now required to have. So there's a shift. I just think that we could really, really have it be a lot broader.
Thank you. I think that brought us to the end, but I will still give you one shot at, about the action. I mean, what would you suggest? I think we already know what we have to do. The question is how, and we debating political discourse shifted from what that we already established as Europe to how, and then it gets really more complex. So if you have any suggestions, any last kind of idea that you want to put in a minute, please do. We can start maybe with Luis.
Well, Elias, that's a very difficult question. You know, I come back to the motto of this conference. It's about action. So we need to take action. We need to move away from the conversation, from the lip service, and really to understand and take bold steps to address the challenges that we are facing. And there are many, and they are interrelated, as the previous speakers also said. So we need to be conscious that we are facing a major issue here. And we, as I said, we all bear responsibilities, each one of us, as individuals, in our families, in our lives, in our business, as policymakers. So we need really to understand that the challenge is paramount and that we need really to think seriously about it and undertake the necessary measures to address it. So coming back to the standard thing, I missed to say that what we're developing with Digital with Purpose actually is a tool, is a standard, is a framework to help companies, any company from any sector, construction, you know, is one of them. The framework can be used really to address the challenge. It's about taking responsibility in responding to the challenges that we are facing. And by the way, I want to make here a short note. Innovation is very important, and innovation is fundamental. But we create many innovations that go to the bin. We do not use them. So we need to be conscious as well that once we develop new things, that they have a purpose, and that they will be used, and they will have a positive impact. Because there are many things that we create that they are useless. And they are still innovations, right?
Very good. Yes, the uptake and the scale up should not be forgotten. Yes. Giga?
I will repeat what I said already. We know how to be climate neutral. We were climate neutral 200, 300, 500 years ago. The question is how to be climate neutral and preserve the quality of life. And I don't agree that we don't need innovation for that. We need innovation for that. There will be plenty of innovations that will be needed in many, many different areas, not just technological. And that is actually good news for, I would say, the whole of humanity, because we are a curious species. We enjoy new things. We enjoy creativity. We enjoy innovation. So I'm an optimist when it comes to solving this problem.
Right. That's good. That's a good message, because people forget that circular economy is not a new concept. Earth was doing it for billions of years, and up to 200 years, even humanity with it almost. Yeah. So this is the oldest concept there is, the circular economy. We just
what was not circular was kind of removed by the evolution. So
that's in a way important to know. Sanjana, what time is it for you? Because you join us from US for several hours. What time is it?
It's 8 a.m. over here. It's 8 a.m.
Okay, so by now you're ready for coffee, I see.
Exactly, yes. No, but this has been a really interesting discussion, and I agree with what both the previous speakers said. You know, we have to be very careful of when we innovate what we're doing. We can't innovate blindly without regards for consequences, and we can't have startups without finish-ups. But also, we are not going to shy away from this concept of innovation because, yes, we are a curious species, and I think that's a really beautiful thing. In terms of what we have to do with regards to climate action, yeah, we know what we have to do, but we have to really ask those very uncomfortable questions, because climate change is going to be very, very uncomfortable. It is already 2 heat waves in a month where I've been. It was awful. But we have to ask those uncomfortable questions of what's going to happen if we don't do this. When businesses come back saying, no, we can't have this, it's bad for business, we have to really, really push what's going to happen if we don't do this. What's going to happen? What are the consequences going to be in 2 years, in 10 years, in 15 years? And why isn't this being valued more in every sector? Because nothing is going to matter. No amount of technology, no amount of art, no amount of movies is going to matter if we don't have a livable planet for it to matter on. So that really needs to be, I think, centered at the core of what we do, and everyone has to be as anxious about it as all of the teenagers who are fighting for their lives right now.
Very good. I just finished with something I said already. ICT is a tool to serve people and planet, but also, as Luis was saying, green transition is an opportunity for ICT sector to bloom and to kind of rejuvenate, and there are many opportunities for ICT sector by going into the, helping the sustainability. So yes, we need to act. There is something called tyranny of convenience. We may need to actually get out of this kind of, it's convenient like this, and find other ways, because we will be touched, I'm sure, somewhere, somehow, everybody. And so thank you very much again to all the participants, to all of you, 3 speakers. So Luis, Giga, and Sanjana. Thanks for the last session. Thanks to, in the backstage, Andrea Dumitrascu, that made it all happen. She's the star of the Connect University. People can see the recordings of all the 2 weeks of sessions. So it's a material that you can revisit. You can send it to your friends that should, listen to it or see your presentations. Normally, if you agree, we will put your presentation up so people can revisit them. And just wishing COVID-free, restful, normal summer break to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Great, perfect. I'll just take this opportunity for the speakers who are still online. If you agree with us to publish your presentation, please send the slides to me, and we'll make sure that these are published in PDF on our website. And thank you so much once again.